Sir,
Hmm.
sir, when you are declaring the third internal exam,
I'll do that before end semester. Maybe next week I'll do that. Okay. See, in intellectuals, Gramsci classifies Gramsci, everybody is intellectual. But everybody is not intellectual in technical sense. Everybody has a worldview, everybody has a viewpoint, from ordinary people to the elite, has their viewpoint. So therefore, he says everybody is intellectual, but everybody is not doing intellectual function, or everybody is not technically doing intellectual job. Hmm. So everybody is a philosopher for Gramsci. Therefore, a philosopher is obviously intellectual. In that sense, for him, intellectual, but what is intellectual functions are not performed by everybody, just as philosophical functions are not performed by everybody. Generally, the conventional understanding of intellectual is a man of letters, a philosopher, artist, or a journalist who claim to be true intellectual. So the philosophers more often think that they are true intellectuals. Similarly, professors think that they are the true intellectuals. This is actually utterly self-arrogance and snobbery. To be very precise, uh, intellectuals for Gramsci are those who are the organizers in different spheres of society. Therefore, organizers, leaders, the organizers or leaders, in different spheres of society, and only philosopher is not intellectual. Similarly, a man of letter or a novelist or a writer is not a intellectual. It's true that they are intellectuals, but they are not true intellectuals. A true intellectual is everywhere in society. All those who organize society, all those who lead society, all those who provide sustenance for our livelihood, for our activities in society are intellectuals. In that sense, Gramsci extends the idea. Therefore, in society, you have many spheres of life: economic life, life in civil society, and the life of the state. Therefore, in three segments of society, you have intellectual. There are intellectual leaders who lead, organize factory. They are also intellectuals. There are intellectual leaders who organize church, organize a temple, organize a mosque, organize trade unions, organize pressure groups, organize family life, organize. They are all intellectuals. All those who organize society in economic sphere or social sphere, sphere of civil society, or political sphere, the sphere of state, are intellectuals. For Gramsci, intellectuals are organizers or leaders in a technical sense. But otherwise, everybody has intellectual viewpoint. Everybody has a, has a viewpoint which is intellectual. Therefore, for Gramsci, it is important to recognize that there are intellectuals of different kind. It is not just intellectuals are simply not just men of letters and philosophers and journalists. They are, but they are the ones who are organized, who are connected to society. Even for Gramsci, the journalist is connected with mass media and organizing civil society activism. Similarly, a professor is organizing, the man of letter is organizing student life, being a professor in university. Therefore, organizing one activity, an educational sphere. Similarly, the novelists, etc., they influence men and women in large family setting. They are the popular writers. they perform one kind of role. They try to conscientize society by drawing attention to moral and political norms of society. Therefore, these are all specific functions. They perform probably civilizational function, but therefore these are all specific functions performed by varieties of intellectuals in real life. So for Gramsci, the man of letter, journalist, or philosopher are to be seen in the context of their role in doing a particular social function. Therefore, suppose a man of letter is there, then okay, what does he write, and how does it impact society? And how does he organize, how does he think of society, how does he influence society, and what is his impact on society? Now, that actually, that is what makes his role distinct. It is not simply because man of letter is important, because man of letter is impacting larger society in different forms, in different directions, and therefore he is intellectual. Therefore, Gramsci is not by doing something in theory become intellectual. Only by connecting theory with practice, you become intellectual. For him, everybody is in the world of practical wisdom, a theme of Aristotle actually. Therefore, everybody is connected with the world of practical wisdom, and everybody, all those who are leaders of practical wisdom are intellectuals. That's very important for Gramsci. To quote him, all men are intellectuals, one could therefore say, but not all men have the function of intellectuals. All men are intellectuals, yes, but not all of them perform the function of intellectual. The function of intellectual is performed by, function of intellectual is to lead, is to organize a particular social life. That's critical for them. Not by simply doing theory, you become intellectual. Only when your theory is connected with practice, you become intellectual. Therefore, for example, my role, for example, here I am influencing students. I am influencing, I am simply not only teaching, writing letters, writing essays, but also influencing audience, larger audience. Therefore, by Gramsci, intellectual must be seen in the larger frame of society. What kind of role intellectual perform? Intellectual can't be simply seen as a man of letters or philosophical wisdom. Otherwise, intellectual cannot be seen simply in theoretical terms. That's important for Gramsci. Therefore, it dismisses the traditional view of intellectual as a man of letters, as a philosopher, as a journalist, as a mere writer. That's very important, but it must be seen in practical connection. Gramsci thinks the practice of intellectual is important for Gramsci. Having said that, let me tell you, he makes an interesting distinction between intellectuals. He says there are, traditionally speaking, there are two kinds of intellectuals: the traditional intellectuals and the organic intellectuals. But if you read Roger Simon and read other books on Gramsci's intellectual, you will find all of them describe Gramsci in a twofold manner. They say Gramsci, intellectuals are two kinds, traditional and organic. But that is actually partly true. In the note on intellectual history of Italy and the note on education, Gramsci talks about only two kinds of intellectuals: traditional and organic. But as he goes on in the prison notebooks, as he talks about notes of Italian history, state and civil society, the future of Marxism, the philosophy of praxis, the other sections in the prison notebooks, the very first volume, and his letters to comrades in the prison while he was in prison, indicate that he had a manifold classification of intellectual. He's not simply a binary classification or a dual division of intellectual, not simply organic and traditional. Gramsci also offers distinction between cosmopolitan intellectual and international intellectual. That's very important. For Gramsci, there are two other intellectuals are also there. organic, apart from traditional organic, he also mentions that there are cosmopolitan intellectuals and international intellectuals. I will come to it. Therefore, keep in mind this. This is actually my innovation. I have not come across anybody making that distinction. Yeah, many people simplistically think that Gramsci, for Gramsci, there are only two kinds of intellectuals. Many authors, if you see Rudolf Simon's classification, he only talks about traditional and organic, nothing else. But in prison notebooks, Gramsci clearly this reading of Gramsci comes from a particular section in the notebook. That section deals with education and intellectual. You deal with that section, you get a dual classification of intellectual. But if you read other notes in the prison notebooks, and then you read also his letters to comrades in various times, letters to sister-in-law and brother and other comrades, you find Gramsci making another classification, the classification between the cosmopolitan and international. Therefore, there are two pairs of intellectuals. One pair that distinguishes organic from traditional, the other pair that distinguishes international from cosmopolitan, and they actually they operate like pair. I will tell you what this pair. As I told you, the diachronic reading of situations or context in Gramsci is very central. He always offers a series of diachronic reading. He offers pairs. By pairing A with B, he would like to offer one kind of classification. By pairing C with D, he would like to offer another kind of classification. But therefore, if you look at Gramsci's pairing, it is a very interesting way of doing it. But I will come to it later when I examine this. Let's take cosmopolitan and international. There is one kind of pair. Who is cosmopolitan? Cosmopolitan intellectual has a worldview, and he or she outlines a worldview and try to influence people through speeches, through communication, through dialogue, to debate discussions, by showing faces in public life. He impacts a large number of people, and therefore he's not merely man of letters. He also connected with audience. But therefore, he outlines his ideas in isolation from masses. So Gramsci argues that this cosmopolitan intellectual is the one who offers a worldview in isolation from the public life. He may be connected with public life indirectly, but all are connected to public life directly or indirectly. But in case of cosmopolitan intellectual, his connection with public is indirect by indirect means. He outlines. He is not at least organizer or leader of public life. He is not actually a public activist mobilizing people to fight for rights, etc. But he may talk about rights in isolation from public. He may talk about rights. He may talk about freedom. He may champion justice in isolation from public, and he may talk about history in isolation from public. That's a kind of a cosmopolitan intellectual. A cosmopolitan intellectual is the one who subscribes to a worldview in isolation from masses. His connection with masses is indirect, not direct. Everybody connected with masses. Everybody connected with public. But the cosmopolitan intellectual is connected with public by indirect means. But even if he is connected with public by direct means, that the intellectual viewpoint is formed by him in isolation from public. That's very important for Gramsci. For example, he says, take for example Catholic Church. Catholic Church in the modern period got alienated from public. But public were going there. Catholic Church also had followers. But the question is, it would develop ideas in isolation from public. It used to practice Bible only in Latin language. Public could never understand that language. Therefore, it was never. Therefore, public were there in the audience in the churches. They visited churches, but they felt alienated there. Therefore, this cosmopolitan intellectual the priest who was the Catholic priest in the modern period was essentially performing the role of a cosmopolitan intellectual. Church itself became a cosmopolitan organization. Church intellectuals in the Catholic Church, not Protestant, Catholic Church intellectuals were by and large, Catholic priests were by and large alienated from ordinary people's language, ordinary people's life, ordinary people's emotions. Though the ordinary people were there, followers, but they're spellbound by the performance of the priesthood class in the Catholic Church. So that is because of the language, medieval culture, connection, etc. So they were weakened by Catholic Church. Catholic Church refused to adopt Protestant methods, and it became more and more purist kind of religious organization, trying to articulate viewpoint in isolation from the ordinary people's perception, ordinary people's language. Language is a very powerful instrument. You can see Catholic Church refused to translate, read out Bible in Italian or German or English language. They refused to do it. The purists, they only articulated a Latin version of Bible. Even in the modern period, despite having Protestant movement challenging that legacy, etc., they refused to change. As I told you, while talking about religion, Catholic Church adopted Protestant method only in 1870s. Until then, it was essentially doing Bible through Latin, not through Telugu or Odia or Italian or German language, never English, never did that until 1870. So Gramsci says, in the modern period, Catholic Church became a cosmopolitan institution that gives ideas, that gives worldview in isolation from, in alienation from the existence of masses. Now that Gramsci says that is also fate of many intellectuals who are not Catholics. But by and large, in the Catholic, in the modern Catholic organization till 1870, one notices this legacy. But it's not merely true for Catholic Church. It's also true for many intellectuals in the university system or in the public life who outline ideas and viewpoints, worldviews systematically in isolation from masses. They will say, well, I will write and let others disseminate my ideas. I am not going to disseminate my ideas among people. It's for others to do it, not me to do it. This view is a typically cosmopolitan view. You are essentially interested in worldview. You are essentially writing letters, writing. You are a man of letters, man of books, but you outline those ideas in the literature, in whatever you do, in isolation from masses. Therefore, that's a typical cosmopolitan role of an intellectual. For example, says Crocet. Crocet was a Protestant, not a Catholic. He was essentially Protestant. But Gramsci calls him a cosmopolitan. He says Crocet gives a worldview. He has influenced all of us, but he's not bothered about influence. He simply says, I will write what I feel like, and for you to take it or reject it. He's not worried about organizing Gramsci or others to follow him. I will simply outline my viewpoint and I will expose my ideas. I will criticize this fellow. I will write on this fellow. But I write on Italian civilization. I write on Italian history. I write on human history. I write on European history. I write on European philosophers. But I will do systematic exposition of them before you. It's for you to take or reject. This says alienated Crocet from everybody else. Though Crocet's writings influenced Gramsci and many others. Therefore, there is indirect influence. Crocet was having indirect influence on everybody else. But he was not worried about it. Therefore, his function was purely a cosmopolitan function. In his activity, he was not trying to mobilize public. He was essentially trying to outline viewpoint in isolation from public. Therefore, a typical example of a cosmopolitan intellectual. Therefore, what Catholic Church practiced for a long period of time in the modern era, especially. Many Protestant believers also did similar thing. Like Benedict Crusade was a Protestant believer, but he also practiced the same thing. Therefore, cosmopolitan intellectual is not ideologically limited to one brand. There can be many varieties of cosmopolitan intellectuals. A Protestant intellectual could also be like Catholic intellectual, like Catholic Church. Catholic Church could also be like Protestant church. Therefore, this flexibility, Gramsci's interpretation is very attractive. He comes out of this rigid understanding of intellectual formation. We have sort of flexible thinking, flexible understanding of intellectual formation. The basis cosmopolitan intellectual is not restricted to only one ideology. It could be part of the left, it could be part of the right. So even left-wing intellectual, Crusade was partly left-wing intellectual. He believed in Protestant. He was essentially resisting Catholic domination. He was demanding secularization of Italian state. Therefore, he was resisting domination of Catholic Church over the state, Italian state. So he was playing a left-wing role. But yet, he was not interested in outlining those views in public. He was not interested in organizing people, not interested in mobilizing people, not keeping them in the loop while trying to outline these ideas. So therefore, he was simply indifferent to mobilizing public, convincing public, persuading public, and accepting his viewpoint. Therefore, he was not, and when he was outlining his viewpoint, he was not mobilizing people. Therefore, cosmopolitan. While you outline your viewpoint, you mobilize people. While you are mobilizing people, outline your viewpoint. While outlining viewpoint, to keep in mind, mobilize people, then you are international intellectual. The exactly opposite. Now, international intellectual is exactly opposite of cosmopolitan intellectual. International intellectual offers a worldview. The similarity between the cosmopolitan intellectual and international intellectual is that both are interested in outlining a worldview. Difference is used. Unlike a cosmopolitan intellectual, the international intellectual organizes his worldview, by mobilizing people. And then by mobilizing people, he learns many things. He also learns viewpoints. Therefore, the international intellectual offers a worldview like cosmopolitan intellectual, but unlike cosmopolitan intellectual, the international intellectual outlines his worldview in connection with public, by learning from public, by adopting strategies from public, by educating public. Therefore, he is both a learner and educator of public. He learns from public in course of mobilizing them, then educates them while mobilizing them. Therefore, unlike the cosmopolitan intellectual, the international intellectual is deeply connected with public life. Example, Marx, Engels, Lenin, Gramsci himself. He doesn't put himself there, but Gramsci himself could be described as such. And Ambedkar, but Gandhi, now Gandhi. And these international intellectuals are usually declassified. They belong to the upper strata, but they represent the public viewpoint, the non-elitist viewpoint. Therefore, the mobilized public, and they represent their spirit, search for freedom, search for autonomy from domination, from coercion, and therefore they identify themselves with the larger public. A typical example is not Ambedkar, typical example is Gandhi or Lohia. They are upper class, but identify themselves with ordinary people, identify themselves with ordinary people's life. They represent their viewpoint and organize them and articulate their viewpoint. They always thought of them, learn from them, organize them, and educate them. Therefore, the international intellectual like Marx or Gandhi or Lohia or Lenin, they are declassified intellectual. They come from upper class, but they declassify themselves. They work like professional intellectuals, mobilizing public, while educating public. Therefore, they are mobilizers and educators of public. They are also learners and they are participants. They are mobilizers and participants. They are learners and educators of public life. Therefore, you find deeper connection between such intellectuals and ordinary people's life. Now, this pair. Why you call it pair? This is called diachronic reading. Now, what Gramsci is doing here is say compare cosmopolitan with international. You see there are similarities. You see there is huge difference. When you are trying to describe a phenomena in terms of similarity and differences, you are essentially constituting a pair. This pairing, a description of a phenomena through pairing, by classifying different aspects into pair, is a task brilliantly done by Gramsci. Nobody else has done this job before him or after him. See, exactly opposite of cosmopolitan is international. Exactly opposite. They all of them come from upper class situation. Cosmopolitan intellectuals come from upper class, and the international intellectuals also come upper class. One intellectual isolated from masses, the other intellectual is connected with masses. Therefore, they can be contrasted with each other. Therefore, they can be paired. The pairing, what I call diachronic reading of a situation, is usually done by Gramsci. Usually, we have discussed that in case of civil society, state, and hegemony, pairing takes place. Coercion and leadership. Consent. So, therefore, this pairing is a novelty of Gramsci's way of looking at history or situations. In this case, he does pairing, and in every other situation, he does pairing. Pairing is actually a unique way of describing a situation. Therefore, Gramsci, unlike many other intellectuals, offers what I call diachronic reading of a situation. In this case, intellectual. Let us go to the other one, traditional and organic. Traditional intellectuals are those intellectuals. They are not necessarily part of the ruling class. They're part of the intermediary strata, but the articulate ruling class viewpoint among common people. It's a very interesting point Gramsci makes. The traditional intellectuals are those ones who are not part of ruling class. They're not part of the elite strata. They're part of the intermediary strata. But the intermediate strata articulate not their viewpoint, they articulate the dominant class viewpoint, where among the ordinary people, for example, priests. Priests articulate the dominant viewpoint of the monarchy among ordinary people, dominant viewpoint of landlordism among ordinary people. Like the Brahmin class in India is centrally playing a critical role by articulating the dominant viewpoint of So the Brahmin class is an intermediate class. It's not, but it articulates viewpoint of feudalism, feudal nobility, and monarchy, and caste system in a systematic way, and they do it among the ordinary people. Now, such similarly, Catholic priests of the Catholic priests of the modern era or the Protestant priests of the modern era, they articulate viewpoint of capitalist class. I'm talking modern Catholic and modern Protestant. Catholic Church after 1870 and Protestant Church from 16th century onwards. The articulate viewpoint of the capitalist class, they don't articulate their viewpoint, their own class viewpoint. They articulate viewpoint of the upper class. They are the intermediate class. But they articulate that among the ordinary people, workers, peasants, students, youth, women. So therefore, that's a a way of looking at the intellectual formation in the modern period. So traditional intellectuals, they're like priests, the lawyers, teachers, doctors, civil servants, who are traditional because they link to the peasantry, small town bourgeoisie, but they articulate the values of the capitalist system, which they don't lead. But they essentially they provide the intellectual function. They provide an intellectual leadership rather than practical political leadership to a class that they represent, or to a class viewpoint, or to a dominant system they represent in their ideology. Therefore, they are the ideologues of capitalist system, though they may not be capitalist class themselves. That is very important. So traditional intellectuals, they essentially come from the, like Gramsci, they come from the pre-capitalist era, but they perform modern functions in the modern era. They may be, therefore they're traditional, but they perform modern function in the modern era. They justify capitalism without being a capitalist himself or herself. That difference you must keep in mind. So, and some of these traditional intellectuals may break away and may join the working class, like Marx or Lenin. They could be traditional intellectual, but they broke away and joined the working class. Therefore, they became international intellectuals. This the way Gramsci classifies things, there is a lot of antinomy, a lot of ambivalence in his characterization. But however, I am trying to present a bit neatly. It may not be fair to Gramsci because Gramsci himself is slightly confused in this matter. But however, it is clear that by and large, the traditional intellectuals they come from the intermediary strata. They don't come from the ruling strata, the dominant strata of modern societies. The organ intellectuals are those who come from a class whose viewpoint they represent and practice. Therefore, and Gramsci argues that look at capitalism. Capitalism survived for a long period of time because it produced varieties of organ intellectuals. There are two kinds of organ intellectuals capitalism has produced. One is the dominant organ intellectual. The other is the deputy, or the agency, or the agents of the dominant intellectual stream. For example, the capitalist class produce its own intellectuals. The merchants produce their own intellectuals. They led the struggle to abolish feudalism. They led a struggle for secularization. Led struggle for democratization. They demanded human rights. Cromwell was a merchant. Was a very important, powerful trader who fought against the British monarchy. He is an intellectual of the capitalist class of the modern time. Similarly, Nehru, who represented the capitalist class, and he came from affluent family, very rich lawyer family, very rich, very aristocratic lawyer. Therefore, this aristocratic class produced its own intellectuals to lead the capitalist society. So they are also organic intellectuals of the capitalist class. But capitalism doesn't rule directly, as you have seen. Capitalism rules indirectly. There are intermediaries who also operate in capitalist system. Therefore, capitalist system has produced varieties of subaltern organic intellectuals. Who are they? They are there everywhere. Take, for example, in the factory, there are engineers, the medical, there are doctors, there are professors who come from rich strata. They represent the capitalist ethos. They articulate their viewpoints among students, patients, and public in factory side. Therefore, they represent the organic intellectuals of the capitalist class, but they are not the owners of these values. They disseminate the idea, they play a critical role, but they are essentially the deputies of the capitalist class. They are well-off people, and but Gramsci says that they are the subaltern, therefore the deputies of the capitalist class, who also help a company to grow, who also help a factory to grow, or the education system to grow, or religious organization to grow. Those intellectuals, uh, they are not the capitalist, they are not part of capitalist class, but they work closely in connection with capitalist class, disseminate their viewpoint, and justify the existence of capitalism in the eyes of ordinary people. Therefore, organic intellectuals are two kinds. One, the organic intellectuals who come from the capitalist class, they are the leading organic intellectuals. The organic intellectuals who don't come from capitalist class, but they come from the upper middle class, working very closely with capitalist class, justify the survival of a factory system or agrarian system or a church or temple authorities or education institutions and so on and so forth. They perform as deputies of the capitalist class. Therefore, they are subaltern organic intellectuals of the capitalist class. For Gramsci, organic intellectuals of the capitalist class are of two kinds. One, the organic intellectuals who come from the capitalist class proper. Second, subaltern organic intellectuals who come from the middle class, upper middle class strata properly, but they represent the viewpoint of the rich, the dominant strata, that is the ruling class of the time. So Gramsci says, for example, interesting point makes. He says, gives many examples. You can think of who are the organic intellectuals of the capitalist class? The main intellectuals of the capitalist class, they are the company bosses, the rich farmers, estate managers, commercial and industrial entrepreneurs. They are the real organic vanguard of the capitalist class. And they are economically active. They own property, large property, and they own wealth, and they articulate the capitalist system, capitalist values. But they do need deputies. Without deputies, they can't survive. They can't do career activities. Therefore, they also produce deputy, subaltern, deputy, or deputy organic intellectual to foster the organizations they set up. A factory cannot survive with only managers. Factory must survive well with the help of supervisors and engineers. Similarly, agriculture farm cannot survive because of rich farming class. It also must have managers and supervisors to run farming society, farming unity. Similarly, industrial entrepreneurs, they must also have engineers and supervisors to help industry to move on. Now, they are the deputies. Therefore, the capitalist class has produced two varieties of organic intellectuals. One is the principal agent or the real organic vanguard. Gramsci uses the word vanguard of organic vanguard, he uses the word real organic vanguard. The other is deputy, not vanguard, deputy of organic intellectuals of the capitalist class. And deputies are essentially like engineers, bureaucrats in the state, and engineers in the factory, so on and so forth. They are the deputies. So everywhere you will find organic intellectuals. You find organic intellectuals factory representing the capitalist class. You'll find organic intellectuals in civil society, representing capitalist system. You'll find organic intellectuals in state, representing capitalist system. And you'll also find deputies. You find vanguard intellectuals and deputy intellectuals, both being organic, representing capitalist class in factory, in civil society, and the state. You find varieties of intellectuals. Therefore, the way Gramsci discusses this, he says because of this, the intellectual function, varieties of intellectuals being formed under capitalism, capitalism has survived. It has become a durable institution. It has sustained itself because it is able to show to society that it is essentially a universal system and it is meant for well-being of everybody. Therefore, it shows flexibility, it shows tremendous agility in surviving, in managing crisis challenges to capitalism. Because of these varieties of intellectuals, both vanguard intellectuals and deputy intellectuals, capitalism has managed to survive. It's an interesting point he makes. Therefore, in the sphere of production, who are the managers, engineers, and technicians? In civil society, politicians, prominent writers, academics, broadcasters, journalists. In the state, civil servants, officers of the armed forces, judges, and magistrates. Factory technicians don't exercise any political influence over factory workers. But they report, they monitor, they put surveillance of factory workers. So, therefore, they play a subaltern role. Now, this classification is slightly confusing. For example, Gramsci says political parties belong to state, but he says politicians belong to civil society. And therefore, Gramsci's classification is slightly confusing because, however, he tries to basically make a neat understanding of system, and process he makes a confused presentation. I agree that Gramsci sounds confusing here. For example, he says civil society, politicians are intellectuals, organic intellectuals. But he calls political party belong to state, not civil society. It's a political party where politicians are part of political party. If political party is part of state, how can you say politicians are intellectuals of civil society? Isn't it? It looks confusing. Thus confusions are there in Gramsci. I am going to grant him some benefit of doubt because you remember he was vomiting blood every week, writing things, writing passionately about all those things. Therefore, his descriptions may be rejected here and there. I agree. But point is, you should understand the intellectual formation in economic sphere, production sphere, in sphere of civil society, in sphere of state apparatus differently. You cannot confuse the intellectual function of these three spheres of life. Intellectual function that is performed in the production sphere is not same as intellectual function that is performed in the sphere of civil society. That is also not same as intellectual function performed in the sphere of state power. So this point is where this the distinction Gramsci brings out between production, economic production, civil society, and the state, the threefold distinction, that is very interesting. But he gets confused and puts them here and there. That we can discount. And I grant him benefit of doubt because struggling really in the prison with his body. And he was every week he was vomiting blood. See, I would not have written anything if I had vomited blood. But man was writing passionately for you and me. Remember his zeal to write for future generation, where I would read because of. But point is, I agree that there is confusion. For example, civil servant. Sometimes you say civil servants are part of the deputy. Sometimes civil servant is a part of the vanguard. Now, therefore, he must classify which civil servant is a deputy, which civil servant is part of the vanguard. So such confusions are there in Gramsci. It will be dishonest in my part if I don't teach you this. But there is confusion in Gramsci here. And especially the intellectual part, he gets confused. And because of his urge to examine all that, he gets confused. For example, he says the subaltern school, university teachers, technicians, scientists, engineers, accountants, subordinate managers, journalists, others in the mass media, they don't fit into Gramsci's category of organic intellectual. Yet he calls them organic. Then he says that they are subalterns. They are the deputy organic intellectual, not the vanguard organic intellectual. So that's how he describes, and there's a lot of confusion here. But point is, his argument is that not merely the capitalist class, but also deputies do play a critical role in offering stability to capitalist system. Therefore, capitalist hegemony operates through not merely organic intellectuals who are vanguard, but also organic intellectuals who are deputies. That point is centrally valid. But who are they and how are they to be understood? That he gets confused. I grant that criticism, but I agree with the critics here. But my point is that Gramsci's way he examines intellectual formation in capitalist class. That is very interesting. And this classification that organic intellectual is not one and same. There is a vanguard organic intellectual, then there is a deputy organic intellectual or subaltern organic intellectual. Both contribute to stability of a system they try to represent, defend, is eternally valid argument. That's a beautiful point and a historically valid statement. Therefore, I agree with Gramsci's broad understanding of how capitalist hegemony operates on a durable basis through various activities of varieties of organic intellectuals who are not necessarily subaltern or who are not necessarily vanguard. They are both. Having said that, Gramsci argues that, therefore he says, if you see, this is one task of hegemony is to de-intellectualize the subaltern strata, so that subalterns remain subalterns. So in this task of hegemony is to perpetuate subalternity among subalterns, so that they accept their fate under capitalism. They say that there is no way out, there is no alternative, there is no alternative system, and we have to live with it. We may be unhappy with it, but we can't do anything about it. Therefore, to live with the system by following a policy of toleration, at least workers must believe that they must tolerate a system which has let them survive. Is this function is essentially performed by organic intellectuals. Therefore, the task of these organic intellectuals that represent capitalism is to perpetuate subalternity of subalterns. Therefore, to some extent, tries to de-intellectualize subalterns' life, so that subalterns don't become intellectuals. Subalterns do not become intellectuals representing subaltern interests. If such intellectuals come into existence, they should be co-opted in the system. So this is this program of hegemony operates through, as we discussed, through co-option of intellectuals coming from subaltern strata, so that subalterns lose their head to elites. The head lies in the intellectual. Subaltern must lose their head. Gramsci uses subalterns are beheaded. Their intellectuals are appropriated and given state power. In the process of this, subalterns lose their intellectual status. Subalterns lose their voices to the elite. And elites, once subaltern intellectuals are part of the elite strata, they are integral part of state power, they are part of the state benefit program, then they don't give voice to subaltern grievance. Therefore, Gramsci says this hegemony operates through a process of appropriation of intellectuals coming from subaltern strata. Under capitalism, there is freedom for everybody to do well in life. But that freedom is exercised only by few, and some of these few manage to rise in life, manage to elevate their life intellectually. And once they become intellectual, once capitalism notices that intellectuals are coming from Adivasis, Dalits, workers, peasants, so on and so forth, rural poor, they must be co-opted to state power, to civil society, and they must in the church, in temple, varieties of organizations, they must represent. Then once they join civil society or state through a process of co-option, they refuse to give voices to subalterns. That's why subalterns lose their head. They are beheaded by their intellectuals getting alienated from subalterns themselves. We discussed that in course of civil society hegemony. So Gramsci said that the actual socialist task is to produce organic intellectuals from among subalterns who must stay with subaltern masses and fight for their rights. So Gramsci therefore argues that this going by the success of hegemony, the imperative hegemony indicate the way hegemony operating negatively for the well-being of subaltern. It indicates that hegemony is not merely de-intellectualizing them, but also appropriating intellectuals from subaltern class by co-opting them in civil society organizations or in state power. Therefore, subalterns lose their head; they get beheaded. Gramsci uses a metaphor called beheaded. That indicates that the socialist politics that articulates the interests of subalterns must counter this narrative, must produce intellectuals from among subalterns who would fight for subaltern rights, who would remain with them, stay with them, connected with their emotions, connected with their spirit, connected with their fighting spirit, and they must organize, they must lead their struggle in real life rather than getting alienated from it and joining state power or civil society organizations. Therefore, Gramsci argues that it's important for socialists to learn lessons from hegemony. Hegemony has two tasks. One, it tries to de-intellectualize subalterns. Second, it tries to co-opt intellectuals. Those few intellectuals that they come from subaltern life, it tries to co-opt them where in state power or civil society organizations. The task of therefore socialism or counter hegemony, the forces that counter hegemony, that represent emancipation of subaltern, is therefore to produce intellectuals from subalterns themselves who would remain with them, fight for them, die with them. Therefore, he says socialism must learn one thing from hegemony. What is that? Just as hegemony is successful by producing organic intellectuals from among the elites, from among the intermediaries. So socialism must also produce similar thing from among subalterns. Therefore, socialism must continuously look for formation of organic intellectuals from among the masses who would fight for them, live with them, die with them. Unless that happens, the socialist project will be unstable, will be influenced by negatively by hegemonic forces, will try to impinge them, try to push them down, try to see that socialism doesn't grow beyond a point. It only remains a local protest, etc. Doesn't become a national platform, and therefore it doesn't become international as well. Therefore, task of hegemony is to micromanage socialism. How socialism should not produce intellectuals from among subalterns. That is a central task of hegemony. Therefore, it is important for socialists to learn from hegemony to counter that hegemony process. They must learn from hegemony and produce intellectuals from among the subalterns. Gramsci therefore says that is possible only when the collective the party, the revolutionary party, which for him is a collective intellectual force, the revolutionary party must have a policy of educating the workers. Without educating workers, you cannot produce intellectuals from among them. The task of hegemony is to spread illiteracy among workers or restrict their educational growth so that they don't produce intellectuals. The task of counter hegemony is to produce spread education among workers so that they produce intellectuals. If therefore the important task of socialism is to basically play a critical role in educating workers so that intellectuals emerge from workers and fight for them. And the what is the typical example of organic intellectual? Ambedkar is a typical example of organic intellectual representing subalterns. And there are not many. See, Ambedkar, remember, Ambedkar said there are people who are the Dalit intellectuals, but they don't give voice to atrocities committed against Dalits in Bihar. You are referring to Jagjivan Ram. Jagjivan Ram is essentially working like a broker, dalal, for the ruling party. Refuses to condemn in parliament atrocities committed against Dalits in his own constituency. Then whose voice he represents? Voice of the Brahminical caste or Dalit caste? Whose voice he represents? Ambedkar says they are dalals. He doesn't name him, but he means that. They are dalals. They represent voice of the dominant caste. They are not even willing to criticize atrocities taking place against Dalits day in, day out in various constituencies of India. And what kind of Dalit representatives are there in parliament? Whose grievance they represent? Whose ideology they represent? Whose viewpoint they represent? Ambedkar says that they are dalals, they are brokers of system, unwilling to even raise voices against system while being part of it. Unwilling. Total unwilling. I noticed that in Lakshmipet, when we did a study, quite a few Dalit intellectuals in state. The police station, quite a few. The SHO himself was Dalit, and the MLA was Dalit, and deputy collector was Dalit, the MP was Dalit, the revenue officer was Dalit. None of them said a word against atrocity committed against Dalits in Lakshmipet in 2012. None of them said. None of them said. Ambedkar would have said they are dalals of caste system. Being Dalits, you don't represent your voice. You are intellectuals of the area, and you don't give the voice to Dalit forces. Then how Dalits will emerge as voice? They appear to be voiceless. Therefore, the Lakshmipet atrocity in 2012 indicates clearly that Dalit intellectual formation has taken place over the last 70 years in Lakshmipet, that is near Srikakulam, 40 kilometers away from Srikakulam, district headquarters. And there are a sizable number of intellectuals from among Dalits and unwilling to speak for, unwilling to condemn, forget speak, don't dare to speak, just condemn atrocity committed against Malas. 4 Malas were butchered by Kapu men and women. Unwilling to say it. Criticize it. Let's say some critical remark. Na? Then why silence when such atrocity take place? That indicates you act as broker of a system. Therefore, in my view, such though intellectual formations, as Gramsci would say, are co-opted, appropriated in the system, they are unwilling to represent the subaltern forces. Therefore, task of socialism is to nurture Ambedkars from among subaltern strata. Ambedkar, remember, he said, I am sorry to say that I don't see Ambedkar among tribes. He said that. That means he was looking for organic intellectuals from various strata of India, various subaltern strata. He must produce organic intellectuals of a different kind. From tribes, from women, from Dalits, from Adivasis, he must represent varieties of organic intellectuals, from peasants, from workers. Only those intellectuals who come from this lower strata, oppressed strata, remain with them like Ambedkar, fight for them like Ambedkar, they can be the true organic intellectual that Gramsci was looking for. That's why a lot of similarity between Gramsci and Ambedkar. Ambedkar said same thing about Adivasis. That I am surprised there is no organic intellectual, there is no Ambedkar among Adivasis. Basically, he said that in the Constitutional Assembly debate, he said there is no organic intellectual from among, there is no Ambedkar from among Adivasis. He said that. That indicates He was also looking for organic intellectuals coming from Adivasis, representing their interests, fighting for their rights, living with them, fighting for people die with them. He was looking for another Ambedkar among Adivasis. That intuition clearly indicates how Ambedkar was close to Gramsci. He was also looking for rise of organic intellectuals from among subaltern strata, representing their interests, fighting for their rights, prepared to die with them. Therefore, the imperative of Gramsci and Ambedkar are quite similar. Both look for rise of organic intellectuals from among subalterns to fight for them, die with them. Without that, and that is possible only when, like Gramsci, Ambedkar also talks about education. Only when education spreads among Dalits, Adivasis, women, peasants, workers, only when education spreads among these, it's possible for the subaltern strata to produce intellectuals who live with them and fight for them, die for them. They would lead the life of Ambedkar. Gramsci was not organic intellectual. Gramsci was an international intellectual, not organic. Gramsci was constantly looking for somebody like Ambedkar. Ambedkar was constantly looking for someone like him among Adivasis. That clearly indicates that socialist project must continuously produce organic intellectuals who would fight for subalterns, live with them, die for them. Without that, the socialist project, as Gramsci would say, I would quote and end here. Socialist intellectuals become a caste or a priest. Without that, socialist intellectuals, socialist party, communist party, the vanguard party will be like a caste or a priest. Gramsci is very scathing in this. Very scathing. Without that, the emotional connection between intellectual and the people will not grow. Intellectual and people they must be connected by the emotions. Intellectuals must stay close to people's heart and their mind. The spirit of freedom, which is as Gramsci would say, that subalterns continuously look for autonomy, continuously look for freedom. That spirit to look for freedom must be cultivated by the intellectuals. They must be with them, with the search for autonomy, search for freedom. The intellectuals must be with them always. Not give up that hope for freedom, not give up the dreams for a better life. Therefore, if the intellectuals don't stay connected with subalterns' emotions, then they operate like a caste or like operate like a priest. They are the Neo Brahmins. Therefore, Neo Brahmins will not bring about social revolution. They will bring out all their revolution, not they will bring out counter revolution. Therefore, left is not learning from people. Left is not staying connected with people. Left-wing intellectuals will operate like Brahminical intellectuals. Mala intellectuals will operate like Brahminical intellectuals. Madhya intellectuals will operate like Brahminical intellectuals. Peasant intellectuals operate like Brahminical intellectuals. All upper class intellectuals will be disseminated among the subaltern life. As a result of this, subaltern life will not grow further. They will remain, subalterns will remain subaltern. They will remain hegemonized, controlled, dominated by the upper class. And the lower class intellectuals will perform the upper class job here. Jagajeevan Ram was performing the upper class role in Dalit life. Lakshmipet, the sub inspectors and revenue inspector politicians, the Dalit politicians, they are performing the upper class role in Lakshmipet. Ambedkar saw that in his life, we saw it in our own life. Similar thing. Intellectuals are not people to give voice. If a subaltern intellectual socialist party is not people to give voices to subalterns, not able to defend their rights, not able to produce intellectuals from among them, not able to educate them and learn them, prepare them well, then that socialist party is like a caste system, is worth giving up. Huh? Gramsci is very devastating on that. He says this is like you will like a caste, you like a priest, and worth rejecting. Therefore, Gramsci's intellectual inquiry is therefore very subtle. His interest in intellectual project is ultimately twofold. One tries to understand how capitalist system has hegemonized, try to control life by producing series of intellectuals, how it has acquired stability, how it try to counter challenges, try to specify, neutralize contradictions. Hmm. Therefore, he says socialism must learn from that. So there's a hegemony operates through intellectual formation. Counter hegemony cannot operate without intellectual formation, and without education, you cannot produce intellectuals among subalterns. The task of socialism is to educate, technically educate workers, not simply politically educate, technically. I will end with a story which I already told you that my last point. Therefore, I must go back to my lecture on common sense. Remember, I told you about Kistaya from Nellore town. He told me and Argopal and Balgopal. He said, "Sir, when Communist Party are not worried about educating us, how will I be educated? How will I read Prasasakti in Telugu? Communist Party never taught me Telugu, made me dependent on them for my 60 years of life. He was already close to 60 at that time. Must have died by now. So when Communist Party made me dependent on them for life, they were only trying to read Prasasakti and they were trying to educate us. I got politically educated, but I could not master the courage to learn from Prasakti. They never thought of teaching us in Telugu. They were the intellectual leaders of us, but they never learned from us. They were not prepared to educate us in Telugu, so that we become readers of Prasakti on our own. And this Communist Party has no future, for sure. The Communist Party is not prepared to educate Kistaya in Telugu, prepare him intellectually to read Prasakti on his own. Is not worth pursuing that goal. It's not a worth party, not a socialist party. It's performing a job of a caste system. It's performing job of a priest before Kistayas. Kistaya is a rickshaw puller in Ongole town. He worked in the A.K. Gopal center. He was driving that rickshaw. We were working there. And he said there are 50 of such rickshaw pullers in the town who are with the party. We were never allowed to learn Telugu. We were never allowed to read Prajasakti on our own. For last 30 years, they made us dependent on them. To whenever they were free, they used to come and tell us what is happening in Vietnam by saying, reading out Prajasakti of that day. That's all. Therefore, he said when they were busy in fighting against each other, when they did have time to teach us Telugu. So Indian Communist Party has lost its goal. Communist parties, I would say, not just party. Communist parties lost their goal. They never pursued the role of education seriously, despite Ambedkar telling them long back in 1920s and 30s. There's no Gramsci, but Ambedkar was our Gramsci. He said, unless socialists, communists pursue this job of education, educating people, making them intellectual, stand on their own legs, fight for their rights, they will have no bright future. That's exactly Gramsci said. At the same time, as I told you, both of them born in the same year. Both Ambedkar and Gramsci are born in the same year. Both faced orthodoxies. Both faced problems with the communist organizations. One is the founder of the Communist Party. The other was not a communist himself. But he was sympathizer. He said, I'm communism my natural ally, he says. A natural friend, he says. Communism is my natural friend. But he was not a communist himself. But he says communism is my natural friend. But remain critical of it. So Indian communism missed this bus of educating subalterns. Thereby, it practiced hegemony over subalterns. Thereby, lost its ground. In Kerala, the site performed slightly better. Otherwise, throughout India, Communist Party, different parties always dominated subaltern life. Always. I told you Kistaya's story. Kistaya always experienced domination over them, over him, or over his rickshaw pullers in Angul town. That is not the success story of communism. That is actually a failure story of communism, because here the communist formation failed to counter hegemony, failed to learn from hegemony. Hegemony operates not by de-intellectualizing people, but by producing series of intellectuals to justify hegemony. Hegemony is stable, durable, because there are forces to justify it. The intellectuals from among the upper class and the middle class, they come in large number to justify system. Similarly, socialism must produce a large number of organ intellectuals to counter system, to reduce subalternity, to eliminate subalternity, to overcome subalternity, to overcome hegemonic influences, hegemony impact. Socialism doesn't do so. It will like a caste or a priest, and worth rejecting the system. Ramsey doesn't say it, but I would say it. But this is futile to run after socialism. If it cannot be, if you cannot educate a Kistaya, can't educate him in Telugu and make him read and write in Telugu, can't even train him to read Prajasakti, understand Prajasakti on his own, then that communism has to be abandoned, rejected by Kistayas of India. There is no one Kistaya, there are many Kistayas of India. There are Kistayas and Kistayas across country. The name may differ. Names may differ, but the question is the roles are rickshaw pullers are everywhere. Everywhere. I give another story, I will end. That's where I stayed away from Communist Party. I was a student of JNU. I was doing my research MPhil actually. And I went to my town. And we took a rickshaw to see a film. That was evening, and I was going with my brother, cousin brother, to see a film. And we had a rickshaw, a long distance. So that day his cycle was not working. We took a rickshaw. And both of us traveled. And on the way, I generally talk to people when I travel in rickshaws. I talk to their feeling, talk to their, to know their minds. So when in fact, this is the story of Kistaya, I collected. Hargopal was chatting with him for a long time. Then I went there, I sat with him, and then I asked Hargopal to ask questions. I collected this story from Kistaya by talking to Hargopal in English. I was not talking to Kistaya in Telugu. But when he revealed, I told Hargopal, this is how you must talk to people. Don't narrate stories. Find out from them what stories they know. So I was doing same thing to this rickshaw in Barampur. And long half an hour drive, so I was chatting. Then he said, "Sir, I have CPI." Then what are you doing? I have given up. So why have you given up? I gave up because once we responded to the call for strike, we went with them and did agitation. We were all arrested. After that, we were locked up. But the party leader who was leading that agitation got bail. And he was a lawyer. He got bail. And when he got bail, he came and told us, I will come back and take you back. Don't worry, you'll be here. I will give you bail. I'll fight for a bail and take you back within next few days. About 12 of us in jail. He only got bail. Party fought for his bail, he got the bail. He left. He never came back. He didn't come back to tell them what difficulties he had in obtaining their bails. He didn't even come back to tell them. He never came back to them. Then they waited for a month or 2 months. Then what to do? Then that he was saying, sir, I thought I should sell everything that I had. I sold my wife's gold. I sold whatever little gold I had. I sold everything. We employed a lawyer. We got bail. And then I got others released. Gradually all of us released. Then we realized, then party came to us. to join a struggle. We told them, we will never join your struggle. You are very fond of putting us in jail. We want freedom. You want to put us in jail. We will never fight for you. If this is the attitude of Communist parties, this his name is, I forget his name, he's actually Bauri. He's a Dalit ex-Sapala. And he's a Bauri, forget his name, Bauri Das something. So his name is also Bauri. Bauri is a caste, Dalit caste, who prepares his basket making, bamboo basket making. Bauri is a caste that prepares bamboo basket making in Odisha. They're the Dalit caste. So, and he said, we'll never get back. We never went back to CPI. Never. Then CPM came, so we never went to CPM. We rejected CPI and CPM for life. They are betray us, they betray our trust. They don't connect with our emotions. They don't fight for our bail. They put you in jail. But they don't fight for our bail. Then what kind of party they are? They don't connect with our emotions. They don't live with us. They don't fight for us when we are in jail. Then what kind of parties are they leading? I said, I was in SFI at that time. I said, oh, this is a really lesson for me. Then I became cautious of all the communist forms. Then I realized Gramsci is useful. So that hard experience, I realized I read Gramsci and I learned valuable lessons of Gramsci. It's because of these lessons, these practical lessons, I think Gramsci's theory is so relevant, so deeply enchanting, and very exciting for those students and teachers who believe in socialism. They must read Gramsci continuously. It's so useful, so fruitful. Not only the way he examines society, but his practical lessons, the lessons of wisdom, the pearls of wisdom are so enchanting, so revealing, so useful. Therefore, listen to Kistaya, party that must make me intellectual. It's a party worth defending. So thank you. I end my talk here, and therefore, let us talk about we'll take 5 minutes break and we'll talk the semester topics. Take, take 5 minutes break, we'll resume after 5 minutes. मैं बोला साहब आपको क्लास स्टार्ट हो गया तो
स्टूडेंट का सबमिट कर दिया था साहब, पर्सनल का पे सुपरवाइजर का पे।
क्लास में चल रहा है।
ओके सर, अभी और एक बना दो सर।
और एक बना चलो आप करो।
ओके सर।
हाँ बाबू नमस्कार। हाँ ऐसे खबर खबर के देना है मतलब मैसेज पटा तो रिप्लाई आसन दो क्या रिप्लाई दो।
Let's start. Okay, let's start, sir.
Yeah, start. Yeah. Okay, so end semester, the format is now different. CE says end semester should be for 50 marks, but the format is different. You can't ask essay questions. There are only 2 essay questions and 2 short notes. Therefore, one will have 15 marks each. So 15 into 2, 30. The other 20 will be split into 2 short notes. Like a semi-essay, but you don't write full length essay. Short notes, so 10 marks each. Therefore, I will have to ask questions. Therefore, there will be some choice. There will be 50% choice in the first essay, first block, part A. Part A will deal with essay questions. You have to answer 2 out of 4. Similarly, part B, they will have short note questions. You have to write 2 topics out of 4 topics. I will ask not questions. I'll give you notes, note topic. On those topics, you write briefly about the topic. So short notes, section B will deal with short notes. I will give you 4 topics. You have to answer 2. So 10 marks each for short notes, 15 marks each for essay questions. Therefore, 15 into 30 and 10 into 2, 20, 30 plus 20, 50. The end semester paper will have 50 marks. Is that point clear to you?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Now try to cover all topics, and I will ask questions on them. Okay. Anything else you like to tell me at this stage?
Sir, timing is same. Timing.
Mohit has written a mail to HOD. HOD has asked our opinion. I think they were revised now, but my exam date is shifted to 21st. So
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
my exam will be held on 21st of December. So be prepared accordingly, but they may give you alternate dates. Let us see. They may again revise. Most probably my exam will be around 21st or so. Not before that, either 21st or 22nd. So time they will let you know. Once the time is the time, they will let you know. Anything else?
Exam duration. We ask for exam duration, sir. We give. You are giving 4 hours only.
Yeah, that's the university time. University is given you 4 hours, not 3 hours.
That's okay, sir.
10 to 2. Generally, university gives you 3 hours in the end semester. But the pandemic context, they increased by 1 hour. So you get 4 hours time, in which you have to answer 2 essay questions and 2 short notes. And the old semester exam was for 4, you have to answer 4 essay questions. Now they reduced, they give you 2 essay questions and then they give you 2 short notes. Therefore, they reduce the number of essay questions you have to answer. That is reduced now. So they have relaxed some criteria, and therefore you should be happy with that. But timetable has some problem. The alternative days are not given. So somebody, Romohit has complained today. I don't know what else he had written a long mail. I have not read. So on, I circulated among us to give opinion. I have no problem. Either at 21st or 22nd, your exam will be held. Even if there is any revision, you will come to know. Otherwise, as it stands, we will have exam on 21st from 10 to 2. So anything you would like to ask about Gramsci or about anything on my teaching or any confusion you would like to clarify?
Sir, we have to read all the syllabus.
Hmm?
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah.
And semester exam, no, you have to read everything. And semester will cover the entire syllabus, whatever is taught.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I didn't teach factory council. There is no time, and I didn't teach modern Prince Communist Party. There is again no time. But there will be a few topics are left. So I will send you. But read those two textbooks which I sent to you. One by Simon, Roger Simon. The other is by Crimson. Those two textbooks will cover most of the topics which are not addressed by me. Roger Simon also has an entry on Factory Council. Read that. So read those two books. They will cover quite a few topics which are not covered by me. And then you can read further on the basis of those two books. Okay, so nothing else there. I quit.
Sir,
Okay.
sir.
Yeah, tell me.
Sir. Sir, my second internal showing 0 marks sir, in e-governance.
I have posted your marks.
But it shows 0
Okay.
marks.
Let me check. Yeah. Are you sure?
Yes, sir. Yes,
Hey, let me check.
yes
And
sir, I will.
I will tell you right now. Result entry. Regular. Nageshwar Rao, no?
Yes, sir.
Oh, you are right. I missed. I missed. I will correct. No problem. I will correct. You're right. I missed actually. Showing 0. And everybody else is okay, no? Did I miss anybody else mark? I have not missed. I'll post, but I'll correct when I go home. My marks are at home, so I can't enter here. I don't know, don't remember how much you got. I'll correct at home, and by evening you'll come to know. You can check
Okay,
tomorrow.
sir.
Okay. Okay. So bye bye.
Thank you, sir.
Have a nice time and
Thank
all the best for end semester exam.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Bye.
Thank you.